June 24, 1941. 0900 hours. A dusty, rutted track 20 miles east of Grodno, Soviet Union. You can taste the grit in your teeth before you even open your mouth to speak. Inside the cramped, sweltering hull of the Panzer III Ausf G, the air is a thick soup of spent oil, sweat, and the acrid tang of exhaust. Unteroffizier Hans Weber, the gunner, presses his forehead against the cold rubber of the TZF-5F telescopic sight. Outside, the world is a shimmering haze of golden wheat fields and dark, distant tree lines, all of it trembling under the relentless vibration of Maybach engines. For 3 days, the advance has been a parade. The Wehrmacht blitzkrieg is no longer a theory. It is a mechanical scythe cutting through the Soviet landscape. To Weber and his commander, Lieutenant Kurt Knispel, the Soviet Union feels less like a superpower and more like a crumbling barn. They've seen the abandoned BT-7s and the clunky T-26s littering the ditches, thin-skinned sardine cans that their 50mm KWK-38 main gun or even the infantry's 37mm POC-36 can pop like overripe fruit. The crew is laughing. Over the crackle of the intercom, the loader, a barrel-chested Berliner named Karl, cracks a joke about how they'll be in Moscow before the harvest is over. He's leaning against a rock of shells, tapping a cigarette against his thumb. To them, the Red Army is a chaotic mass of uncoordinated peasants led by a command structure they've already decapitated. Their confidence isn't just high, it's bulletproof. "Contact, 12 o'clock!" Knispel's voice cuts through the banter, sharp and sudden. Weber's hands fly to the transverse wheels. He scans the horizon. Emerging from a clump of silver birches nearly 1,000 meters away is a shape that doesn't fit the silhouette cards they've been memorizing for months. It's low-slung, wider than anything they've seen, with tracks that look broad enough to walk on water. But the most striking feature is its geometry. There are no flat surfaces. The hull is a series of aggressive, raked angles, like the prow of a predatory ship cutting through the tall grass. "What the hell is that?" Karl mutters, his laughter dying instantly. "A heavy tractor?" "It's a target," Knispel barks. "Range 800. Armor piercing. Fire." Weber centers the crosshairs on the strange Soviet tank's frontal plate. He feels the familiar, violent recoil as the 50mm gun barks, filling the turret with a fresh cloud of white smoke. Through the optics, he watches the tracer streak across the field, a perfect shot. It hits the center of the Soviet tank's frontal plate with a brilliant flash of sparks. In any other encounter, that would be the end of it. The crew would watch for the brew-up, the black, oily smoke indicating the fuel or ammunition had cooked off. But as the dust clears, the strange tank doesn't stop. It doesn't even slow down. The shell hadn't penetrated. It had skidded. It had struck that slanted glasses plate and been deflected upward, screaming harmlessly into the sky like a pebble skipped across a pond. Weber blinks, his eyes still glued to the sight. The Soviet tank, a T-34, rotates its turret. It's a slow, mechanical growl of a movement, purposeful and terrifying. "Hit it again," Knispel yells, his voice an octave higher. "Karl, hurry, again!" To their left, a battery of the infantry's 37mm POC-36 anti-tank guns opens up. This is the Heer's Aanklopgerät, the army's door knocker. The name was a joke back in France, a testament to its lightweight and reliability. 3 rounds in rapid succession slam into the T-34's side. Ting, ting, ting. The sound carries even over the roar of the engines. The German gunners watch in literal disbelief as their shells shatter against the T-34's armor or simply slides off the sloped surfaces. The door knocker is doing exactly what its nickname implies. It's knocking, but nobody is letting it in. The T-34's long 76mm gun flashes. 100 yards to Weber's right, a Panzer III erupts in a fountain of orange flame and jagged steel. The turret is tossed into the air like a coin, spinning twice before crashing back into the earth. The laughter in Weber's tank is gone. It has been replaced by the cold, sickening realization that the rules of war have just changed, and they are on the wrong side of the equation. "Driver, reverse," Knispel screams. "Get us into the tree line. Reverse now." The T-34 continues its steady, rhythmic clatter forward. It isn't just a tank, it's a mechanical nightmare draped in steel that shouldn't exist. The sound is what haunts you. It isn't the boom of the cannon or the roar of the engine. It's the high-pitched, metallic screech of a shell losing its fight against physics. Inside the Panzer III, Hans Weber watches through the TZF-5F as another 50mm round strikes the T-34's turret ring. He sees the tracer elements spiral wildly into the air, a glowing white spark deflected by the sheer geometry of the Soviet steel. "It's like we're throwing eggs at a wall," Karl screams, his voice cracking as he slams another shell into the smoking breach. His hands are shaking now, the swagger of the Berliner loader evaporated. He doesn't even bother to wipe the sweat stinging his eyes. Outside, the situation is even direr for the men of the 12th Panzer Division's infantry support. Gefreiter Erich Hoffmann, a veteran of the stroll through France, is crouched behind the small rectangular shield of a 37mm PaK-36. His gun crew is working with mechanical precision, a deadly ballet they've practiced until it became instinct. "Fire!" Hoffmann bellows. The door knocker barked. At a distance of barely 200 meters, the 37mm round should have punched through the side of any Soviet tank like a hot needle through butter. Hoffmann watches, his mouth hanging open, as the round strikes the T-34's side hull. It doesn't penetrate. It doesn't even crater the metal. Instead, the shell shatters upon impact, sending a spray of useless fragments into the dirt. "Again! Lower! Aim for the tracks!" The crew loads another round in 4 seconds. Crack. Another hit. The T-34 doesn't even flinch. It continues its rhythmic, clattering advance, the wide tracks effortlessly flattening the charred remains of a German supply wagon. To Hoffmann and his crew, the tank looks less like a vehicle and more like a moving fortress, a slate-gray monster that refuses to acknowledge the laws of German ballistics. The nickname Heers Aanklopgerät, the Army's door knocker, had been a badge of affection in 1940. Now, as the T-34's massive 76mm barrel begins to depress, pointing directly at Hoffmann's gun pit, the name feels like a death sentence. They are knocking, and the only thing answering is the grim realization of their own obsolescence. "Abandon the gun! Out! Out!" Hoffmann screams, lunging to his right. He barely clears the edge of the shallow trench when the T-34 fires. The high-explosive shell doesn't just hit the PaK-36, it vaporizes it. The light anti-tank gun is twisted into a blackened skeleton of steel, and the ammunition boxes ignite in a series of secondary pops that sound like a cruel mockery of the infantry's efforts. Inside the Panzer III, Weber is fighting the controls. The tank is lurching backward, the driver, Peter, gunning the engine so hard the entire hull vibrates with a bone-shaking frequency. "Hans, the turret! It's coming around again!" Knispel's voice is a jagged rasp over the intercom. Weber tries to lead the T-34, but the Soviet driver is surprisingly nimble. Despite its weight and the thick armor that just laughed off a dozen hits, the T-34 pivots on a dime, its wide tracks gripping the soft Russian earth that would have bogged down a German tank. It isn't just a wall, it's a wall that can outrun you. "I can't get a lock. He's too fast," Weber shouts back. The T-34 ignores the reversing Panzer III for a moment, choosing instead to crush the remains of the anti-tank battery. It rolls directly over the wreckage of Hoffmann's gun, the steel tracks grinding the German machinery into the mud with a sickening, screeching groan. This isn't combat anymore. It is a mechanical harvest. Weber sees the T-34's commander peering out from the hatch for a split second, a man in a padded leather helmet, his face obscured by dust and shadow. There is an aura of terrifying calm about the way the Soviet machine operates. They know they are invincible. They know that every shell the Germans possess is currently bouncing off their slanted hide like pebbles. "Karl, the tungsten rounds, give me the PZ-40, Knispel orders, his voice tight with a desperate hope. The tungsten core rounds were rare, expensive, and supposed to be reserved for the heaviest of emergencies. Karl fumbles with the rack, his fingers slick with grease. He pulls the specialized shell, its blackened tip signifying the extra penetrating power. Loaded! Weber exhales, centering the crosshairs on the T-34's lower hull, the only spot he hopes might be vulnerable. He waits for the T-34 to crest a small rise in the field, exposing its belly for a fraction of a second. "Die, you bastard," Weber whispers and pulls the trigger. The Panzer III rocks violently. The tungsten round, traveling at nearly 1,000 meters per second, streaks across the gap. It is a direct hit, dead center on the T-34's lower glacis. Weber holds his breath, waiting for the explosion, waiting for the monster to finally stop. The dust clears. The T-34 is still moving. The tungsten round, the most powerful projectile in the German arsenal, had struck the slope at an angle and ricocheted just like all the others. It had zipped off the armor and vanished into the blue sky. The silence in the German turret is absolute, broken only by the frantic panting of the crew. They have used their best gun, their best ammunition, and their best aim. And the T-34 is still coming. The monster doesn't just survive, it hunts. Inside the Panzer III, Lieutenant Knispel's voice is gone, replaced by a rugged breathing that fills the intercom. You can feel the vibration of the T-34's V2 diesel engine through the very earth, a deep, tectonic thrum that makes the high-pitched whine of your own Maybach engine sound like a toy. The Soviet tank ignores your retreating Panzer for a moment, its commander seemingly bored with the door-knocker shells. Instead, it pivots on its broad tracks, the steel links biting into the soft Russian soil with a terrifying grip, and surges toward the soft underbelly of the German advance. 500 yards behind you, at a temporary supply depot established in the ruins of a collective farm, Oberreiter Dieter Krause is leaning against the fender of his Opel Blitz truck. He is a man of logistics, not a frontline brawler. He has spent the last 3 days complaining about the dust and the quality of the coffee, convinced that the fighting was miles ahead and the danger was non-existent. To Krause, the war was a series of maps and crates of sauerkraut. Then the tree line erupts. It isn't a shell that hits the depot first. It is the sheer physical presence of the T-34. It bursts through a wooden fence and a stone perimeter wall as if they were made of parchment. Krause drops his tin mug, the lukewarm coffee splashing over his boots as the slate-gray ghost of a tank hurtles into the motor pool. The T-34 doesn't even waste its 76mm ammunition on the thin-skinned trucks. It simply drives through them. You watch from your retreating turret as the machine slams into a row of Opel Blitzes. There is a sickening sound of screeching metal and shattering wood, a sound like a giant stepping on dry autumn leaves. A truck loaded with spare parts is flattened into a pancake of twisted steel in seconds. The T-34's wide tracks, designed for the very bogs that have been swallowing German transport, allow it to glide over the wreckage without losing a mile of speed. "God in heaven," Carl whispers, peering through a vision slit. "It's not stopping, it's just walking over us." The goulash cannon, the company's mobile field kitchen, is next. The T-34 lurches over the stove, the heavy iron wheels snapping like twigs, sending a fountain of hot soup and embers into the air. For the German soldiers in the rear, the sight is psychologically devastating. This was supposed to be a safe zone. This was supposed to be the victory lap. But here is an invincible predator, an iron ghost rampaging through their sanctuary. A group of desperate German infantrymen from a nearby signals unit scramble out of a barn. One of them, a young soldier with a face white as chalk, clutches a geballte Ladung, a bundle of 7 stick grenades tied together. It is the only thing they have left that might stand a chance. He runs alongside the T-34, the engine heat blasting against his skin, and heaves the heavy explosive onto the rear engine deck. The explosion is massive. A pillar of black smoke and fire engulfs the back of the Soviet tank. The German soldiers cheer, a brief, frantic burst of hope rising from the chaos. The smoke clears. The T-34 emerges from the cloud, its cooling fans humming, its engine still roaring with a rhythmic mechanical heart. The grenades had merely scorched the paint and dented the heavy louvers over the engine. The tank doesn't even pause. It rotates its turret with a slow, purposeful growl, the long 76mm barrel sweeping across the courtyard like the finger of a vengeful god. Krause dives under his truck as the T-34 fires its machine gun. The DT rounds stitch a line of jagged holes through the canvas and wood of the transport column. To the men on the ground, the T-34 is no longer a machine. It is a force of nature. It is the realization that their technology, their training, and their very understanding of the war have been built on a lie. Back in your Panzer III, Knispel finally finds his voice. "Driver, stop. We can't just run." "Lieutenant, we can't kill it," Peter the driver screams back, his hands white-knuckled on the steering levers. "If we stay, we die." You look back through the optics one last time. The T-34 is now standing in the center of the flaming depot, framed by the oily black smoke of burning petrol and the wreckage of the German logistical dream. It sits there, idling, a mechanical nightmare draped in sloped steel that shouldn't exist. It isn't just a tank. It is the end of the Blitzkrieg illusion. The tank terror has begun, and it is spreading like a fever through the ranks.
June 25th, 1941. 2200 hours. A converted command bus parked in a darkened orchard near the Niemen River. The air inside General Heinz Guderian's mobile headquarters is thick enough to choke a man. It's a cocktail of stale cigar smoke, the ozone smell of overworked radio sets, and the metallic tang of unwashed bodies. Outside, the night is punctuated by the rhythmic, distant thump of heavy artillery, but inside the bus, the only sound is the frantic, uneven clicking of a teleprinter. Guderian, the man who literally wrote the book on tank warfare, stands over a sprawling map of the Eastern Front. A single overhead lamp casts deep, jagged shadows across his face, making him look years older than he was just 72 hours ago. His fingers, stained with ink and nicotine, trace the red lines of the German advance, but they keep pausing at Grodno, at Seno, at the spots where the red arrows have suddenly stalled. A young staff officer, Lieutenant von Kleist, steps into the pool of light. He is holding a stack of combat reports, their edges charred from a hasty courier run. He looks as though he's seen a ghost. "General," von Kleist's voice is a thin whisper. "The reports from the 17th and 18th Panzer Divisions, they are all the same. They're calling it Panzerschreck, tank terror." Guderian snatches the papers. He reads the words of his frontline commanders, men he hand-picked for their aggression and iron nerves. They are describing a miracle tank. They are reporting that their standard anti-tank tactics are not just failing, they are being laughed at. "One single Soviet tank delayed our entire advance for half a day," Guderian mutters from the 12th Panzer's dispatch. It sustained over 20 direct hits from 37mm and 50mm guns. It only stopped when a 105mm flak gun was brought up for point-blank direct fire. He throws the report onto the map table, right on top of the neatly drawn plans for the encirclement of Minsk. The crumbling barn theory, the idea that the Soviet Union was a primitive giant with wooden feet, has just suffered a catastrophic collision with reality. To Guderian, the technical gap is more than a tactical problem, it's an existential crisis. The Germans had spent years refining the Panzer III and IV, believing they were the pinnacle of engineering. Now, in the first week of the invasion, they've discovered the subhumans they were supposed to conquer are driving machines that are 10 years ahead of anything the Reich possesses. "They have sloped armor, von Kleist," Guderian says, his voice low and vibrating with a mix of professional admiration and sheer dread. "Simple, elegant, sloped armor. It doubles the effective thickness without adding a kilogram of weight. Why didn't our engineers think of this? Why are we still building boxes?" He paces the narrow aisle of the bus, his boots clicking on the metal floor. The mood in the room has shifted from the euphoric arrogance of the first 48 hours to a cold, creeping realization. The Blitzkrieg relied on a psychological edge, the belief that the German machine was invincible. But once a soldier realizes his gun cannot kill the enemy, the machine stops working. The tank terror isn't just about destroyed panzers,
It's about the destruction of the German soldiers' will. Radio the OKH, Guderian barks, turning back to the map. I don't care if it's midnight in Berlin. Tell them we need a commission of engineers on the front lines immediately. Not in a month, not in a week, now. He slams his fist onto the table, the pins marking the German positions jumping under the impact. If we do not find an answer to this T-31, this tank terror, this campaign will not end in Moscow. It will end in a graveyard of German steel. He picks up a red pencil and circles a section of the front where the T-31s are most numerous. He knows what he has to do. He has to order his men to engage in suicide tactics, closing to within 50 meters to aim for the T-31's vision slits or tracks, or using 88mm anti-aircraft guns in a way they were never intended to be used. It is a desperate, bloody stopgap. As the teleprinter begins to clack again with more reports of unkillable tanks, Guderian looks out the window at the burning horizon. The illusion of superiority is dead. The war has just become a race of industrial survival, and for the first time, he's not sure if Germany can win it.
November 18th, 1941, 1400 hours. A muddy field workshop on the outskirts of Orel, Soviet Union. The wind doesn't just blow here, it bites, carrying the first crystalline shards of a winter that promises to be legendary in its cruelty. Dr. Adalbert Richter, a senior design consultant for MAN, Maschinenfabrik Augsburg-Nürnberg, pulls his coat collar tighter, his leather-gloved fingers trembling as he holds a precision micrometer. He isn't looking at a German machine. He is standing on the scarred, soot-blackened engine deck of a captured T-34, surrounded by a group of officers who look less like conquerors and more like survivors. "Look at this," Richter says, tapping the 45-degree slope of the glacis plate with a heavy wrench. The sound is a dull, solid thud that speaks of high-quality cast steel. Simple, brutal, efficient. Our Panzer III is a masterpiece of clockwork, but this is a weapon of the future. Beside him, Guderian stands with his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the wide tracks that allow the Soviet machine to float over the freezing slush that has currently paralyzed half of the German transport fleet. The tank commission has finally arrived, sent by a frantic Berlin to answer the question that has haunted every German tanker since June. How do we kill it? The troops are calling for a direct copy, Guderian says, his voice flat and weary. They want us to paint a Balkan cross on this exact design and put it into mass production. They don't want German precision anymore, Richter. They want Soviet survival. Richter shakes his head, looking at the rough weld seams, the work of a laborer, not a craftsman. National pride won't allow a direct copy, General, but the influence will be absolute. We are finished with vertical plates. The age of the box is over. The scene shifts from the frozen mud of Orel to the high-ceilinged, sterile drafting rooms of Essen and Berlin. The atmosphere is one of frantic midnight oil desperation. Thousands of blueprints are torn up and scattered like snow. The engineers at Daimler-Benz and MAN are locked in a silent war of their own, racing to create the VK 30.02, the project that will eventually become the Panther. You see the evolution in the charcoal sketches on Richter's desk. The silhouette begins to change. The nose of the new tank stretches out into a long, aggressive rake, mirroring the T-34. The gun grows in length, evolving into the 75mm KWK-42, a high-velocity needle designed specifically to pierce the heart of the iron ghost that had laughed at them in Grodno. Simultaneously, at the Henschel Works, a different kind of monster is being birthed. If the Panther is the response to the T-34's grace and slope, the Tiger is the response to its invincibility. It is a 54-ton sledgehammer of chrome-nickel steel built with a single purpose, to ensure that no German tanker ever has to watch a shell bounce off a Soviet hull again.
By the time the snow begins to melt in the spring of 1943, the technical landscape has been utterly transformed. The tank terror of 1941 has forced Germany into a frantic industrial sprint it wasn't prepared for. When the Panther finally rolls onto the steppe at Kursk, it carries the DNA of its enemy in every sloped plate and every wide track link. But as Richter watches the first production models leave the factory floor, there is no joy in his expression. He looks at the production numbers on his clipboard and then at the reports from the East. For every Panther Germany builds, the Soviet factories behind the Ural Mountains are screaming out 10, 20, 50 T-34s. The Iron Ghost wasn't just a tank, it was a herald of a new kind of war, a war of attrition where quality is eventually drowned by the sheer, relentless volume of a simplified, superior idea. The German tankers would get their heavy steel, they would get their long guns and their thick armor, but the laughter that had filled Hans Weber's Panzer III in the golden fields of Grodno would never return. The T-34 had done more than just deflect shells, it had shattered the myth of German mechanical destiny, leaving behind only the cold hard reality of a long, losing struggle against the red tide.